Good evening and welcome everyone to our very first Worthy Town Hall, Disrupting and Transforming Education in 2025. We have with us an esteemed panel, some colleagues I've known for many years and was very honored when they said, yes, we'll be glad to participate in this discussion. I think every one of us on here understands the seriousness of this discussion, and we're eager to participate and help bring the discussion along. I would like to say right at the top, before we dive in, that the Worthy Educator prides itself as being a safe place for educators to come and share ideas and build momentum towards a bright future for education. So on that note, this is a nonpartisan discussion. We all bring our own views in, and we have our own political opinions. But this is not a left discussion or a right discussion. This is open to all educators, understanding that there are educators of every political persuasion in the profession. We're going to avoid conspiracy theories. We're going to avoid being alarmist. We're going to deal in facts and build constructive strategies. So when you leave tonight, you'll feel that you've had a chance to vet the issues and walk away with some action items that you can implement as you're ready. Having said all that, I'd like to do a round robin and introduce our panel. I'm not sure how they're showing up on anyone else's screen, but why don't I call each of you and introduce yourselves and tell a little bit about your background as veteran educators who have been doing the work. We'll start with Cheryl Apshire.
Well, good evening or afternoon, depending on what part of the globe you're in. As Walter mentioned, I'm Cheryl Apshire. I am the former Chief Technology Officer for the Calcasieu Parish Schools in Lake Charles, Louisiana, a rural, urban, suburban district, about 34,000 students. Longtime educator, began my career as a teacher, moved into the library and media field, then became a school principal, then became the Chief Technology Officer there for almost 25 years, and also a university professor. Began using the internet when it was in its infancy. In fact, no one had the internet or knew what the internet was when I began, and then realized the deep potential for connectivity for advancing student learning. As a principal, wired the first school in Louisiana for the internet. Have been deeply involved in education advocacy for most of my career, and was fortunate during the Obama administration to be appointed to the USAC board, which manages the Universal Service Fund, and very specifically as an educator, E-rate. So I began doing E-rate in year one and have stayed deeply involved in that and deeply concerned as the mother of 3 children that went through public education and now the grandmother of 5, and a lifelong educational advocate. I'm delighted to be involved in the work that Walter and the Worthy Educator are doing with my colleagues, Kathleen and Susan, and a myriad of other people, so that we may talk constructively and think about what can we do as a community of concerned individuals about how we move education forward in this country.
So well said, and we're so honored to have you with us, Cheryl. Thank you for making time. Just so everyone knows, Cheryl's down at FETC, and she could be out having a great time at the conference, but she's here with us because she knows how important this is. So we really appreciate that. Susan Brooks Young, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Boy, it's hard to follow Cheryl's introduction.
Sure.
I started off teaching Head Start preschool way back in the day. And I realized after a couple of years of doing that if I only taught kindergarten instead, I could make a whole lot more money. And so I got my elementary credential and ended up teaching 5th and 6th grade, which was not what my original plan had been at all. But that's okay, because by the time I left the classroom, I had taught literally every grade from pre-K through grade 8, including teaching some kids in 7th and 8th grade that I had taught in kindergarten. And that was really an amazing experience. So I, after a number of years in the classroom, decided that I was interested in moving into administration. I was a teaching assistant principal and assistant principal at the middle school level. I was an elementary school principal, and I always had an interest in ed tech. My mother was also a teacher, and she had taken a TRS 80 into her classroom.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I
Um,
recognize that.
Radio Shack.
yep,
Yeah.
yep.
Yeah.
And so I caught the bug from her. And she also had given me some sage advice, which was there are 3 people in the school that nobody ever messes with. They don't mess with the secretary, they don't mess with the custodian, and they do not mess, at least in California, with the person who knows how to use the Apple II Plus that was donated by Wozniak all those years ago. So I became that person and have been involved in ed tech ever since then. I, in 2000, moved, no, it was 2004, moved to a farm on an island in the middle of nowhere. And my husband had retired, and that was where he wanted to live. There was one school on the island, and the principal did not want to quit his job. So I started a business and worked as a consultant and still am since 2004. And my areas of expertise have been leadership. I worked on the development of the original NETS A standards that
Wow.
ISTE published
Yeah.
a long time ago.
Yep.
Was also involved over the years then with the development of the other standards in some way, shape, or form. Most recently, until this month, had been working with ISTE on an artificial intelligence program for 7 years and an early childhood program, all around, again, the use of technology. And well-being is the other area that I've been interested in, and the juxtaposition of well-being and use of technology. That is way too much out of me. So thank you.
Thank you. And we're so thrilled to have you with us, Susan. Kathleen McClaskey. And just to point out, as we go to Kathleen, Cheryl represents the South, Susan's out on the West Coast, Kathleen is from the wonderful state of New Hampshire, and I'm sitting right here in Virginia. We've got the whole country covered. We're good. Kathleen.
Absolutely. So let me just say that I've met Walter back in the 1990s when we were both tech directors in Massachusetts.
What happened? What happened?
What happened, right? So my career started over 40 years ago in technology, and it wasn't called technology back in 1983 when I started my master's degree program in technology and education. I even saw then, and I saw technology, computers, as the great equalizer. So in my career, I worked part-time as a Title I teacher as I was going to graduate school and raising 2 very young children at the same time. So I took the Leslie program, by the way, starting in 1985 after I transferred out of Riviera College in New Hampshire and finished my degree there in 1988 with a master's in computers in ed, not technology in ed.
Yeah.
So, but I was actually a computer teacher in 1988. Did incredible things with 7th and 8th graders. Loved that grade level. And I went on to be a tech integration specialist, a tech director, where I met Walter at some meetings that we used to go to on a regular basis. And then I was a tech director also in New Hampshire. I walked out of K-12 in 2001 after 9/11, and the rest is history. I've been a consultant. I've owned several companies. And in 2011, I met another gal, Barbara Bray, and we started personalized learning.
Yes.
We went on to consult with schools all over the country around personalized learning. We gave a course called The 5 W's of Personalized Learning and co-authored 2 books, Make Learning Personal and How to Personalize Learning. So I've been a consultant ever since. I've consulted and been in most states and you know, I hate to even think how many at this point, but I absolutely love the work, and I still do that work. And I'm always focused now, especially on the learner, because I think we need to empower those children to be able to self-advocate about their learning, ask for what they need, and also to develop agency in their learning. So self-advocacy and agency is the focus of my work with all learners. And we want to just empower them because in the next few years, those learners will need to be empowered.
It's so well said. And Kathleen has a webinar coming up with us on February 5th, talking about her work and giving you the chance to develop your own learner profiles. And we're
Right.
excited for that. So looking forward to it.
Yeah.
So a lot has been happening in education, and for us long timers, we can just look you right in the camera and say, what we're about to discuss has been coming for a long time. This is not the result of a November 5th election. This is something that, if you've been watching the trends in education, there's been a movement in this direction for a long time. And if the most recent developments and the way things are looking is an impetus for us to finally say we need to speak up, we need to do what's best for kids, we need to inform the discussion as best we can across the spectrum, then so be it. And that's why we're here tonight. We're all aware, and we've been hearing about some of the proposed changes that may or may not be implemented with the new administration, which comes in 5 days. So a quick review, some higher level points that are of concern to those of us in education. The elimination of the Federal Department of Education. That is something that was hard fought for a long time. And now for most of us, it's been in existence for most of our career. And it's important. It's something that, as we discussed tonight, we need to advocate to maintain that office in the new administration. Converting Title I and IDEA, two longstanding programs that provide so much support for students with special needs, for programs that public school districts everywhere rely on, converting them to block grant programs where there would be, and this is all just out there, this is not done, no strings attached for implementation. So you could get that money and not necessarily have to be true to the original intent for the needs of the kids that it's supposed to support. And of course, there's concerns there because when there's big money involved, how is it being spent? And how do we hold ourselves, never mind anybody else, accountable for how we're spending it? And I think all of us have sat in school district decision-making rooms where those discussions have taken place over the years. And these guidelines and laws really help keep us honest and do what's best for kids. They're not something you can just wave your arms and make go away and think it'll be okay. The discontinuation of Head Start, a program that's been around for what, at least 60 years, preparing children to enter K-12 and making sure they have the experiences to be ready to learn, to be literate, to be successful. The rollback of protections against discrimination for marginalized groups. So many things that were put into policy and into law over the years. And rolling them back just allows, well, it makes us go back. It allows things to happen that we have enacted, putting these things in place so that they no longer were taken for granted and that everyone was treated equally under the law. And then finally, something that we all know is there, but we don't always talk about, the federal funding for school lunch programs. And show me a community in this country that doesn't rely on that funding, especially for kids that come to school hungry, breakfast and lunch, and being able to feed them so they're ready to come into the classroom and be engaged and make the most of the learning. And so a lot to be concerned about, but for us, rather than thinking of it as just taking away from things that are in place, we see this as an opportunity to reinforce what's good about these programs, and then talk about how we can transform the institution of education. Because as we all see, society is changing quickly. And there are a lot of things about education that we're still doing from the industrial age that may or may not serve us well anymore. And if there are opportunities here to advocate for ways to change to reflect society and continue to keep up with the needs of children coming into K-12 who are going to inherit a world that we can't even completely envision, then we should be in that conversation too. So that's a lot to bite off and think about. The chat box is open for those in the audience. Those of you live streaming, thank you for listening in. If you're live streaming, you won't be able to feed us comments and questions here, but you certainly can benefit from the conversation. And so, panel, having rattled off that short list of concerns, let's start the conversation. And Kathleen, why don't we jump in with you?
Yeah,
Kathleen.
so I was hoping that you would have the slides that I sent, but I like to be able to do slides because I really think it's very important to make this particular presentation accessible to all learners that are listening. Okay, so I'm going to try to share that out.
Please.
And I'll do that right now.
No?
Okay.
Yeah, please
So,
do.
Okay. All right.
Here we go.
Let's be patient here for just a moment.
Mm-hmm.
Say, okay. Okay, so Walter covered a lot of territory here in regards to Project 2025. And we hear often about that 900-page document. And there is definitely very specific sections in there. And I spent a little bit of time there reading the whole section just on education in the Department of Education. And that's under, by the way, under Chapter 11, if you want to do a quick search. But you'll find there. And so I've sort of just highlighted some things here. So what's the overarching thing for Project 2025? Vouchers, vouchers, vouchers. Okay. Well, I just want to say that I did a little research on this, that a lot of states call these education savings accounts, and they're currently active in 29 states. And that particular money, vouchers, every state legislature has, they've created and passed laws to be able to pay tuition to homeschoolers, private, religious, and non-religious schools. Okay. And why I wanted to point this particular one out is that this is something you're probably saying, well, how did all these things happen? Education savings accounts. We have that in New Hampshire, by the way. I think we're the only New England state that has that particular program. And there was legislation that was proposed across the country, developed by another organization called the American Legislative Exchange Council, who developed the legislative language so that we would have these education savings accounts, or what's called the voucher system. And so laws were passed in all these different states. And just to give you an idea about how much here in New Hampshire, now we're a very small state, by the way, and actually we're anticipating in the next year with these changes that could possibly be made in the 25-26 school year, that there'll be over $100 million just in the state of New Hampshire in vouchers. That comes out of public dollars because we in New Hampshire actually support, we don't have an education budget in the state, but the property tax supports education. So this money comes directly out of our taxes in every town in New Hampshire. Okay. But this is happening and will happen in probably these 29 states that already have that particular legislation.
Yep.
Yes. The elimination of the Department of Education. I just want to make a point here is that even though this is part of the overarching theme for this Project 2025, it takes an act of Congress, by the way, to eliminate the Department of Education. Okay. And it also takes Congress to be able to change the rules around Title I and IDEA.
Yep.
Okay. But let's face it, we have a majority here, and that, and they're hoping, by the way, that this money that's vouchers, Title I will be used for that particular reason.
Yeah.
Kathleen, if I could just ask you a quick little question to reiterate, wouldn't you agree that while the elimination of the department would require congressional action,
Right.
there's way to cut the legs out from under it that wouldn't formally eliminate it, but would
Right.
hamstring it from what all of us in the country know? I mean, I
Right.
just
Yeah,
love that you said that, because that's such a
Yes.
valid concern.
Yep.
Well, the thing is that, Title I, IDA, which are the two largest, blocks of money that goes to states, okay, that could certainly happen. And I think that that's a really strong possibility that they'll go out as block grants. I do know that, there are parent information centers all over the country, by the way, that will probably be fighting on behalf of their kids, okay, around this. So, and they will approach, legislators across the country.
Mhm.
So I think that there's a whole group of other people that are going to stand up for sure. But you don't really have to eliminate the Department of Ed. You just have to, just cripple it at this point.
Yeah.
By taking money out, and dropping this money at the state level, because the focus is that everyone should be all this money should be going to the state anyway, and we should make the state responsible for education, period. Okay. And that's the whole reasoning behind this.
Yep.
And again, the end of Head Start, by the way, which is really designed for really the very poorest children who really need to have that additional years, some foundational, experiences to prepare them to go to kindergarten. And Head Start's been around for really a very long time. I want to say probably 50 or 60 years at this point.
And extremely positive results.
Right.
Research indicates out of students that go through Head Start
Right.
programs, how they, as they matriculate against students that didn't, their whole early childhood experience is essentially much more positive, and their learning outcomes are much more positive. So the research is out there, like you said, Kathleen, on
Right.
years of data.
Right, years of data, yes. And and I think that will, I hate to say, will probably be the easiest thing to let go. And I'll be surprised if, in fact, that it doesn't. Okay, but I want to talk about Title I and IDA, because these are the largest block of money that any school gets. Okay. So Title I, $18 million for fiscal 2024. It's the largest federal program, but it's designed to help children from low-income families. Now, but this is one of those things, and I've read a lot and a lot of commentary saying this would be really hard to eliminate, because every school, so many schools in the United States receive Title I grants, okay? And I don't know how many legislators want to be able to stand up and say they basically have moved it into block grants instead of that. Virtually, Title I will be used for vouchers. There's no two ways about it.
But the caveat to that is the very people that access and use Title I programs, many of those populations, as you said, are in poverty, disenfranchised, minority populations, early language learners. So they're advocates that sit in their homes may not be the most well-informed, and the assumption is things will continue to move on. And the
Right.
people that don't benefit from Title I programs are possibly the most well-informed, and they're like, we don't need that. My kids
Right,
don't need Title
right,
I.
right.
And that, to me, is the salient point of this, is the people that get the most benefit and need it the most,
Mhm.
very well may be the least informed about what we're talking about tonight. That
Exactly.
is
Right.
my deep, deep abiding fear.
Yep.
Well, the thing is, this stuff that we're talking about tonight, by the way, doesn't really show up in the news, okay, necessarily. I haven't heard anyone even talk about any of this, right?
Yep.
I'm not too sure how long that's going to take. I think it'll take probably a couple of months into this new administration for anything to even be discussed. But I'd be surprised if it's never talked about or ever in the newspaper. So the thing is, I'm hoping that people will actually begin conversations, talk to their local newspapers and stuff like that to get, because that's where a lot of people, some people get their information still locally. And especially, in social media, I think that's a lot of places where people get information around whatever's happening on a national level or even on a local level. So, but here's what's going to happen, of course, with Title I. I mean, the block grants are going to have very few restrictions. And I know now, I mean, just in my state alone, they would be using this with no problem, okay? Because, $100 million here in the state of New Hampshire is quite a bit of money to be taken out of local coffers, okay? So the other thing is Title I, they plan to end all of Title I, by the way, in the next decade. Okay. And so that local taxpayers will have to fund Title I because that money will go away. We're talking $18 billion in schools just this current year. All of this, by the way, all of the Title I and also IDA will also be moved to the Department of Health and Human Services, and that is how that will get distributed out of that department.
Yep.
So there's a whole rearrangement of of the chairs in the Department of Ed. They're going to keep moving people around to different departments before they probably ever eliminate the Department of Education. Okay, so they'll weaken it so that they don't have any kind of oversee. They can't oversee any of this money. And let's see. Oh, okay. And then the last part here is about IDEA. That's $14.2 billion. And these is about kids with disabilities, okay? And what they plan to do here is, again, to provide that to individual states, filter it down to the local education associations, the LEAs, and they can basically do what they want to do with it. Okay, they may act, obviously kids have IEPs and they have certain programs that are designed specifically for kids, and every kid has certainly some either tutoring or some sort of support. They even have a person behind that child. So, but they're also wanting to be able to give some of that money, by the way, to parents of children with disabilities, so parents can actually go out and actually get tutoring or support services outside of the classroom environment. Okay. I just think, just to really reflect on all of this, I just think this is almost like unmanageable. Okay, to start moving stuff out into block grants. That's my own opinion. I think the states would have a really difficult time to do that because there's not that infrastructure in place around this money. And of course, the costs in the end are going to be on the local individual, the local homeowner. Okay, all of this in the end is going to, that's exactly what's going to happen, is that you get rid of Title I, and if you want to maintain any of that, the local school district is going to have to pay for it. Okay, in 10 years or whatever. It may end up before 10 years, but I think that This is very intentional, and the groundwork has already been laid for those people that are listening in for
Yeah.
all of this to happen. Okay. And legislation has been passed in a lot of places to make all of these changes that are being proposed in Project 2025 to occur.
And,
Okay.
and many states are salivating at this possibility.
Yes.
Many
know.
governors have been a part of these conversations and just delighted that this money will flow to them with them having the authority
Yes.
to
Right.
dictate. So I know I
Right.
was talking to some superintendents the other day and they were like, oh, we want this money, block it down to us from the state. We don't want restrictions. We won't know what we need. And I said to them, are you so naive to believe that that money is going to flow directly through the state to you on a per
Yes.
pupil allocation, and
Right.
you get to do whatever you want?
Right.
There is a distinct possibility you may see very little of it. The state may absorb it and create agencies and their own programs that
Mhm.
may not provide very little service to you. I'm like, and they're like, well, they can't do that.
No.
I said, you are naive. You are
Right.
naive to believe that anything is possible. You should be informed and
Yes.
knowledgeable to be able to speak truth to power in your own school boards and to your own legislators, and do not assume anything.
And that
Right.
is the American way. I mean, that, to
That's right.
speak up. Cheryl, talk a little bit more. You mentioned universal service a bit. Talk a little bit more about what you're seeing as ed tech implications in all of this.
Well, I think we're at a crossroads. In fact, tomorrow at FETC, I am doing a session with Reg Lecty,
Mhm.
who is counsel and the lobbyist for COSA, for the state ed associations, an extremely knowledgeable, lives in DC, and John Harrington, who is the CEO of Funds for Learning, that I think his wife believes he lives at the FCC instead of at home because he's so engaged. But
Yeah.
again, doing E-rate from year one. And we're going to be talking about the future of E-rate and also federal program involvement, everything we're talking about tonight. And
Yeah.
one of the things that we're going to be talking about is a deep concern about a ruling that came out of the Fifth Circuit, which interestingly enough, that court sits in New Orleans, but covers Louisiana and part of Texas and some southern states.
Yep.
A ruling that basically initially said that universal service, the funds that are collected through telecom processes, was not constitutional, and that the FCC did not have the authority
Right.
to give the authority to the Universal Services Administrative Corporations to collect funds and distribute them.
Yep.
So we were all like, okay, good, that didn't work. Then they went back to the Fifth Circuit for the entire Fifth Circuit to hear the appeals. And they said, oh, wait a minute. We agree. This is probably unconstitutional. So now it's been referred, and because I'm not an attorney, I'm not going to use the legal terms, but there are a lot of legal terms around what the ruling was held as, and that it's been referred to the Supreme Court. From what I understand,
Wow.
they will hear it,
Yes. Mhm.
Yep.
and there's a chance that it could go back to Congress to redesignate who gets to get the funds.
Right.
It could go back to the FCC
Mhm.
to figure out, can the Universal Services Administrative Corporation, do they have the constitutional right to
Mhm.
collect funds?
Right.
One of the very scary things I'm hearing is, well, we'll just move this whole thing back, and it could be a congressional appropriation.
Wow.
Mm.
That could be the worst thing that could ever happen in terms
Right.
of connectivity. And I'm going to say now, offering a 22nd century education for our students with connectedness. And I was in tons of conversations today about this. And one of the things I said is, why are you believing that the goodness will prevail and that certainly we would not stop funding internet to schools and libraries in this country?
Right.
I said, you don't have the senior status I have and know what has happened in the battles that we fought
Yeah.
with the 96 Telecom Act and how it has evolved over the years to be absolutely essential that we don't just cut the internet. Now, will some wealthy districts that don't really get E-rate discounts say, we don't care?
Right.
But other districts will say, we can't afford it. And
Yeah.
what are we going to do? Go to dial-up?
Right.
And when we talk about third world countries and we're like, oh, that's a third world country.
Yeah.
It could absolutely turn off the lights essentially in schools.
Yes.
Because here's the deal. Back when we were all in school, all the curriculum, all the content came from textbooks.
Right.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's not the case anymore.
No.
Because
Right.
digital content rules.
Right.
And the pandemic was the catalyst to put a
Right.
device in every child's hands, every educator's hands,
Right.
and buy massive amounts of digital content that replaced traditional textbooks. So what do we do?
Right.
Do we go back and dig up out of the trash pile some of the old Jack and Jill readers? And you know, I'm just being so
I know.
absolutely over the top about this, but it is a deep, abiding concern to me because I know how hard we fought.
Right.
And I know I've traveled extensively internationally.
Yep.
And we were the leader in connectivity in our schools. And
Yep.
that's
Yeah.
no longer the case.
No.
We no
Right.
longer
That's right.
lead in connectivity in schools.
Right.
All these countries sent people to here to learn what we were doing and went back home and funded it. And
It's-
now I was in Uruguay, small country, extremely poor.
Mhm.
Every child has a device 5
Yeah.
years
Wow.
ago.
Yeah.
And there is a net over the country
Yeah.
where everybody is connected.
Yeah.
I went by homes where children sat on dirt steps.
Yeah.
And by the light of the screen of their computer is
Yeah.
how they were working. They had no electricity in their home,
Wow.
but they had internet connectivity in a fully charged device.
Amazing.
And so we better pay attention.
Yeah.
We better pay attention.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Susan, how about external pressures in all of this?
Yeah, I've been sitting here listening to Cheryl and Kathleen and thinking about much of what they have talked about, and Kathleen even mentioned that that's kind of flying under the radar. If you don't know to
Yeah.
look for it, you
Right.
don't know that it's going on.
That makes
I,
sense.
on the other hand, volunteered to talk a little bit about a lot of things that are in our faces.
Thank you.
One of the things I learned as a school principal was we didn't always do a tremendous job telling our story. People who lived
Mhm.
in the neighborhood at my last school, they believed we had a great school, and they were very supportive.
Yeah.
But my school, that particular school, was located on the city limits of El Monte and South El Monte.
Mhm.
And if you ever have been around California,
Mhm.
you know that neither of those are considered ideal areas to educate and raise your children. They have lots and lots of challenges.
Yeah.
And so the word away from my school was very different about what people assumed was happening there.
Yeah.
And they were wrong.
Yeah.
We were doing some remarkable work. And so today, I think that's exacerbated by again, things that happened during the pandemic. The
Mhm.
pandemic pulled the covers off so many deficits.
Yeah.
I'm not saying we were perfect. You know, what we're trying to do is remarkable in
Yeah.
education.
Yeah.
But it is certainly not perfect. And one of the things that really came to light for me and was part of the impetus for some of the well-being work that I've done is the shaky relationships that we have sometimes even with our parents, but
Yeah.
certainly within the community where people make assumptions about what's happening and they don't really know. And that is the kind of thing that allows things to happen. Like I was looking today at a newsletter that comes out from Ballotpedia.
Yes.
And it's a newsletter that really focuses directly on schools and school boards.
Mhm.
And in the newsletter that came out today, they were talking about recall elections that happened within the last year. And surprisingly, or at least I was surprised, most recall elections happen locally.
Yeah.
The vast majority are city councils members.
Oh.
But the second highest number are school board members. And in 1 year recently, school board members were the most heavily targeted elected officials to be subject to recall.
Yeah.
What does that say?
Yeah.
You know? And when you look at organizations, there are a number of organizations that cropped up during the pandemic because people were scared. People were in an environment they didn't really know how to deal with. And so, of course, the problem was masking, and the problem was having to do online education, and the problem, all these other things that were foreign to people, they didn't really want to do. That became sort of the enemy. And who were they dealing with most often that was enforcing that right in their faces? Oh, wait, it was the schools. And so you started seeing school board meetings where people whose kids didn't even go to that school district
Yeah.
were there demanding that changes be made and that the school people march to a completely different drum from what they had been doing before. And that's had a terribly negative impact on trust in communities, trust in the educational system.
Mhm.
People on the education side, I mean, I know teachers who are afraid to open their mouths now.
Yeah.
Because they're afraid they'll say the wrong thing.
Right.
And if they do, they might lose their jobs.
Right.
You know? And also book bannings
Yep.
have risen this past year. There were more requests that books be banned in schools and in public libraries than have ever been requested prior to or up for the time that they've been actually tracking these kinds of requests. And a very telling thing about that, in 2021-22, hundreds of challenges were filed, and they came from 11 people. That's documented by the American Library Association.
Yeah. Yeah.
Many times they had not even read the book.
Great.
And so one of the things that I did this Christmas, I wasn't sure my family members were going to love it, but it ended up turning out to be a great thing. I gave every member of my family and my extended family and even some friends a copy of a banned book for Christmas. From the youngest person to get one was 5 years old, and that child received a copy of And Tango Makes Three.
Yeah.
And I think the oldest person was in their early 70s, and they got a copy of A Handmaid's Tale because they had
Yeah.
never read that. But many of the books that I gave to people, they said, no, that's not banned.
Right.
And I said, oh, yes, it is. The Lovely Bones was one of those
Yeah.
books.
Yeah.
And so I think right now, due to just sort of a confluence of all kinds of things that none of us ever would have predicted because it would never have seemed realistic,
Yeah.
we've ended up in a situation where we don't know who our friends are. We don't know who they aren't. We
Right.
don't know what we can say and what we can't say. But I think the important thing is we've got to be brave. I'll tell you one decision I made as a school principal years ago, and then I'll be quiet. I was a principal when a law was passed that said if immigration officials came on campus, we were to give them information about all of our undocumented students.
Yeah.
And if we didn't, then we faced arrest. And I, the single mother of 2 kids, made the decision that if in fact that happened, I would not turn the records over.
Yeah.
That was just
Right.
something I could not do and live with myself.
Yeah.
Now, they never showed up on my doorstep,
Thank
so
God.
I don't know what I
Yeah.
really would have done with an
Yeah.
official in my face. But it's time that we stop being fearful
Yes.
and that we start being proactive.
Well,
Right.
and you saying that brings to my mind the conversation that I have had with people about misinformation and where are your reliable sources? Where are facts? Where are things that are not true or manipulative? I
Yeah.
have heard conversations from what I considered to be reasonable, learned people that told me, a lifelong educator, that things needed to be shaken up because children were going to school as boys and they were coming back where they had been turned into girls.
What?
And the first time I heard that, I said, you think we have time in school to do surgery on children?
Right.
We can't even get a school nurse for the flu.
Yeah.
No, we're going to be having sex change operations in schools.
Right.
And they said, well, Cheryl, you were very naive because a lot's going on you don't know about. And so I asked them where their sources were, and I'm not going to go into that. But people that have, quite frankly, been deceived and given misinformation and that suits some cause or not, that is absolutely unequivocally not true. And so that is when my worry radar
Right.
peaked, is that, as you said, the book thing, oh no, our children, they're not gonna not have the internet, we're not gonna do this. And I think, Walter, the brilliant thing you have done with this informational piece in the Worthy Educator, with a catalyst for a call to action for pay attention. You don't have to believe the 4 of us.
Right.
Reach out and get factual information from unbiased sources and inform yourself, become engaged, informed, and don't 6 months, a year or 2 from now say, how did that happen?
Right. Now is
You
the
know,
time.
Yeah, how does this happen? It happens when good people, good-minded, well-intentioned people assume that the status quo is going to remain the same. And I guess what I'm saying is, wake up and smell the education roses.
Right.
Find out what the facts are from reputable sources.
Yeah.
right.
Reputable sources.
I
And
mean,
cable
And-
TV probably is not on that list.
Right. And the internet that
Yeah.
we've spent years teaching information literacy, and yet here we are. So from
Yeah,
this
don't
excellent,
ask your friends on Facebook.
no,
Yeah.
no,
But,
right,
or
right,
people that
right.
you've never met that friended you on Facebook
right.
in an effort, we know what goes on about
Yeah.
these groups on social media that are not even real people. And so I'm just saying, check your
Yeah.
sources. As a former librarian, check your sources.
Absolutely. And, on that note, and thank you, Susan, for bringing us full circle on this whole discussion. We've been doing our own reading and checking information and ideas, and we've come up with what we're calling the 4 charges. They're moral imperatives, things that we need to do. Many thanks to Indivisible. We did a lot of reading through them, and they provided structure for us in thinking about making these recommendations. So let me cite the 4 charges, and then group, let's talk about them.
Okay.
Number 1, protect people who are going to get hurt. I think you've heard enough already that there are populations in the public that depend on public education that this could adversely affect depending on decisions that are made. Number 2, protect the institution of public education. We all acknowledge it's not perfect. There are things that can be improved, but dismantling things isn't going to make it easier or better. It's only going to make it harder. Know when to stand up and when to stand down. And the group is going to do a great job of talking about that. There's a lot of experience here with that. And finally, from our community, our core group, reach out and make connections with other like-minded groups. And it doesn't just have to be groups of educators. It should be all education stakeholders. So those are the 4 charges. Panel, talk to us. What does that rise up in you when you hear those things?
Talk to your friends. Talk to your friends. And we're sitting here, Walter. You're our young man here in the group with 3
Which is saying
ladies
something.
here.
Yeah.
But we all know the power of mothers
Yes.
and the power of women.
Yep.
And I'm being facetious when I say coffee clutches or bridge club or I don't know, book clubs, everything that young, middle-aged, senior women do in their friendship circles and I would suggest people not to tell, but ask questions. I've always
Good
found the
point.
best strategy is to ask questions. Have you heard about this? What do you think about this? Do you know anything about that?
Mhm.
So,
Should look about that. Girlfriends that go out for dinner or that, all the things that families do. And I'm going to say this as a female, a mother and a grandmother, at the heart of the social culture in families
Mhm.
is the mother.
Yeah.
And fathers are extremely important. But it seems like over the decades, mothers have been the organizers of the family and the vacations and getting the kids to school, and dads are critically important. And I just hope that women in our country will start to ask each other questions and say, wait a minute.
Yeah.
And again, seek out, be truth seekers.
Yeah.
Be truth seekers.
Amen.
yes. So one of the things I live in a very small town, not much, and I don't know, I know, Cheryl, you live in Houston, Texas, so that I can't even touch, but here in small towns, everything is local. And so I was thinking, I think I'm actually going to try to meet up and have coffee with a school board member.
See? Yeah.
And the thing is, and we actually have local elections here every March. We vote on the budget. We vote for all the school board members. We vote for the selectmen and all that other stuff, the school budget, the town budget, total local control in the state of New Hampshire.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, and it's a small town. Well, there's only like 12,000 people in our town. Okay.
Yeah.
So you can, and I think that really, I haven't really ever met with a school board member. We actually have actually like 3 school districts in this area under one what's called SAU, and with a superintendent. And I just think that just having these conversations, even with people that you don't even know that well, I'm more apt to do something like that. And talking to my neighbors, I live in a very small little community here. And I think that we've just made so many assumptions about how education, has gone for all these years. But this could be highly disruptive, highly disruptive. Okay. We don't have Title I in our school district because we have plenty of money. It costs us, on the average now, I think, like $22,000 a student that we're supporting in our town with our property tax. Okay.
Yeah.
Just think about that. Okay. People are invested in education here, but I think that if you could step out of your comfort zone for a moment and go and ask someone, could you meet with me so we could have this discussion? Because we have a very large legislature, and there's like 450 legislators in this very little small state. So maybe I'm going to go speak with a legislator in my town. I haven't
Maybe
done
you
that before.
should. You're
Yeah.
just the girl to do it.
There you go.
Oh yes, and just saying, because time, this is not going to take much time because the groundwork has already been established here in 29 states.
Yeah.
Okay. I can share that information off with you. There's a report that just came out recently on all of this. So I think that you have to be proactive with legislators, and they represent you. Okay. State legislators represent you more than your federal legislators, because what's going to go on here is going to be all local. Okay, state and local. It's all moving in that particular direction.
Yep.
And I would step up pretty soon. Okay.
Yeah.
We're going to have an election here in March, but I think shortly after March, I'm gonna knock on some doors and see if I can meet up with people. Just have a coffee somewhere locally and just talk to them.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's really, really important, and we've talked about community, which is one of the 4 strategies, and that definitely is very important, but also recognizing how important local control is. Kathleen talked a lot about federal stuff. We don't have a whole lot of influence over what the folks in federal offices decide they're going to do. But we do have influence with our school boards, our city councils, our county or parish whatevers, our state level legislators. I've given you some examples from California, but actually I've lived in Washington for the last 20 years.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've learned in Washington is that from the state level down, all of those people are very accessible. They're a phone call away. And I've learned to be a much better advocate for myself, for the kids that I work with and the educators that I work with. And there's some other issues that I do some healthcare advocacy and some other things. And recognizing where we've got the most influence and the most power is really important. Our legislative session in Washington started Monday.
Yeah.
And we are our legislative sessions are online, which was a good outcome of COVID.
Right.
They kept that, but we can testify online.
Yep.
We can have meetings with our legislators online.
Yep.
And when I was a classroom teacher or I was a beginning administrator, it never occurred to me that it would be okay for me to talk to any lawmakers.
Right.
But it is. Maybe your superintendent crazy, but it is. It is okay for you to do that. And it's really important that we give
Mhm.
ourselves permission to step
Mhm.
out and to become advocates.
And so we hear loud and clear, attending school board meetings, get on the agenda, speak up. They need to hear from all sides, and educators are certainly an informed group that needs to be heard. The letter writing and calling campaigns. And I'm really dating myself now, but back in the late 70s, I was an intern for Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan.
Whoa.
And I'm telling you, they counted every day
Oh
the
yeah.
calls
Oh
they were
yes.
getting. I
Oh
sat there and
yes.
opened the letters and sorted the piles. And it
Mhm.
doesn't matter what they think, if they get enough calls and letters saying, this is the way we want you to respond, it does matter. And
Mhm. It
so,
does.
My daughter worked, she still lives in DC, but she worked for a congressman
yeah,
when she finished law school for over a decade.
wow.
And at one point in time when we were doing some of the E-rate advances,
Yep.
and I, through ISTE and Cozen and Shelby and every group I could think of, reached out and we did all these campaigns. And because she was very connected there, I can remember her calling me one night and saying, Mother, you have to stop. And I'm like, what, stop sending you money? Stop letting you use my credit card? Okay. He said, you have to stop all your little friends because they are calling all of the congressmen.
Yeah.
We cannot answer our phones. Back then, faxes, just
Right.
one fax after the other, so many emails. And as you said, Walter,
Yep.
they have to document and
Right.
present that data to their senator, their congressman,
Yeah,
and
that's right.
report out what's going on. They said, we cannot do our jobs.
Right.
And I said, well, I tell you how that stops, Sonny. Y'all just take care of those E-rate reforms,
Right.
and we will tell all our little friends to stop.
Right.
And the other wonderful thing is every call you make is counted. If they don't
Yes.
count
Right.
the individual person, they
Right.
call
Right.
they count the individual calls and
Absolutely.
letters and
Right.
emails. So I
Right.
tell people to do it every day. And it's not just the feds, it's
Right.
also at the state and
Yes.
county and local level.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
tell you,
Right.
especially all of us that are retired,
Yep.
bird it up.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Email is the best thing on the planet
Yeah.
because you can set an email to send it 4 or 5 times a day. Send
Yep.
it, send it.
Right.
And with all of our groups, with Cozen and ISTE and
Yes.
Shelby and those groups, advocacy groups, they have the message. All you have to do is put in your zip code,
Right.
bam, and it gets sent.
Yep.
Yes.
Right. I
But
mean,
you have to do a little bit, not a lot, just a little bit
Yep.
can make a difference from enough people.
So, Cheryl and I have been down to DC more times. She's been more than I have, but I've met up with Cheryl for the last 20 plus years, advocating for federal legislation and policies and budgets. And yes, they actually do listen to you, and most people don't really understand that. If you make that phone call and you want something to go a certain way, everything is counted. There's these very young people running these offices, but
Yes.
their total responsibility at that desk is to actually to record all those. And if there's a vote going on or a vote coming up, they're there taking those particular notes.
Yep.
It's so important to become an advocate. Okay.
Yes.
No matter who you are, you need to stand up because this particular democracy is really based on people who stood up and voiced
Right.
their opinion. Okay. And, I always look at it this, our democracy is at stake here. Okay. And the way that education has been running over the last number of decades, this is going to change.
Yeah.
Okay. And very few people are going to know about it. So if you know about it, and if you're on this call or you're watching this session, please just stand up, meet with the legislator, meet with a school board member, and really speak up, okay, and tell them what you see needs to happen, okay. I was a mother of two kids that fell into IDEA.
Yeah.
And I've been associated with organizations over the last 20 to 30 years who have lots of children that fall under IDEA.
Mhm.
And I would believe, and I actually want to speak with the Parent Information Center. So if you have a Parent Information Center, which almost every state has, speak up and ally yourself with them, okay? These are people that, these will be the first people, by the way, that would actually lose funding for their centers, okay?
Right.
And really don't want that to happen. I know
No.
how long it took to get those centers, okay?
Right.
And they're invaluable in every single state.
Yeah.
You know,
And
another thing you're saying that reminds me, we talk about Kathleen and I, fortunately, we've had resources and the support of our professional associations to be able to go to DC and lobby.
Yeah.
That every congressman and every senator has regional and local offices that we
correct.
fund as taxpayers.
Yep.
They're funded taxpayer dollars.
Yep.
They are staffed, and those people are extremely accessible. You can pick
Right.
up a phone and call that office and make an appointment to go talk to them or
Yeah.
invite them to
Good
a
point.
meeting that you're having, and they show up time and time again. Even your state senators, your state representatives
Yep.
have local offices.
Yes.
Right.
And part of their responsibility and their accountability is to staff those offices
Yep.
every single day,
And that's
other
also
than
true.
holidays.
Yep.
And
That's
you
also
can call them, you can drive up to the office and just walk in. And you know what? Most of them are not very busy because
Right.
nobody goes to see them.
Right.
Yep.
And
It's
you
also
can
true
go
at the
and make
county
your case.
and the state level or the city level as well.
Absolutely.
And it's not just reaching out to elected officials.
Right.
It's reaching out. We used to parade our kids at different Kiwanis meetings
Mhm.
and Rotary and Lions and have
Yep.
them go sing or do some kind of whatever at meetings.
Yeah.
So that the service club folks were familiar with the kids and the kinds of things they were doing.
Yeah.
You can write letters to the editor. You can, I used to go out to local businesses and
Yes.
ask them what we could do for them. And for example, having adult ed classes on campus where their
Yeah.
employees could attend and they
Sure.
would, release them from work, part of the workday, to go take a class.
Yeah.
We would have community cleanup days and we would invite everybody in the neighborhood to come help clean up the school.
Yeah.
And anything that you do like that, where you are reaching out to people who vote, or maybe they don't, or who might be contributing to certain elected officials,
Yep.
or who might have an opportunity to talk up what you're doing elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Never miss an opportunity to toot your own horn and talk about what you're doing.
And the point isn't lost on us when you say local is where you have the most influence.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
it
Right.
doesn't, we're talking very loosely about, show up at a local office or make a phone call or write an email. But educators are great organizers. We do it every day in our classroom. And so
Mhm.
when we talk about these things, hold your own local meeting. Bring together not just educators, but stakeholders, anyone you know locally who's a supporter of education, and plan a letter writing campaign. Plan phone calls for a 2-week period where it's orchestrated enough that the office receiving them sees the bump and realizes there's an organized group out there that's sending us a message. being able to have a town hall like this locally for your people. And when I say your people, I literally mean your people, the people you know who believe in the things you do and see how worthwhile this is, so that it's not hit and miss. And you're not just having one-off conversations and hoping
Right.
everybody is going to get off the couch, but actually come up with a plan so that people follow through and the impact is really felt. Because otherwise, we're all
Right.
well-intended,
Yeah,
but
well,
it
years
doesn't.
ago in Hilton Head, they were
Yes.
having the devil of a time passing bonds or levies
Huh.
until they started a mentoring program because, you know, a majority of people who live in Hilton Head are retired.
Right.
But they have people who provide services for them who have children.
Yeah.
And so the bonds and levies weren't being passed. But when the retired folks started coming to the schools and mentoring the kids
Yeah.
and having faces and names
Yes.
instead of just this ethereal, off in the distance elementary school, I don't have any kids.
Mhm.
My grandkids aren't there. Why would I worry about that? But that's when they started passing bonds.
Public relations 101. Yeah.
Right.
And by the same token, for all of us who at least consider ourselves tech savvy, social media is a great tool.
Mhm.
You don't
It
have
is.
to simply meet with who you can physically meet with locally, but bring together people online. If you have a favorite social media platform, Facebook, LinkedIn, Blue Sky's new and up and coming, bring together people on those platforms. If you can form a group so they have a place to keep coming back to, having conversations, and it gives it an asynchronous function where they don't all have to be on live every conversation, but you can keep those running dialogues going, share files, have an occasional straw poll, have a live streaming meeting. There's a lot of power there for organizing. What would you all say about that in terms of your experience? Have you been able to use social media in that regard as of yet?
Yes, but not in the realm of education.
Okay, well, tell us more.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I do a lot of healthcare advocacy
Right.
as well, and actually am an organizer for a statewide group that is looking at the impact of consolidation on hospital and medical systems.
Yes.
And we have never had an in-person meeting. Everything we have done has been online. We have an e-newsletter. We do Zoom presentations.
Mhm.
We testify and lobby during congressional or legislative sessions in Washington
Yes.
online. And we have been able to leverage, we've not gone into Facebook or Instagram because most of our members are of a certain age and their heads explode. So we
Right.
haven't done that.
Right.
But we have pushed them to their technological limits. And we've been very successful in terms
Yes.
of pushing bills, of getting bills considered that weren't being considered before, of working with the Department of Health and some of the programs there, working with the State Attorney General's office.
Yes.
It's amazing what you can do with an e-newsletter and a little bit of just being stubborn.
Well, and following through to
Oh,
make it
following
a little
through.
nicer.
Yes, that's right. Following through.
There
Yes,
you go.
thank
No,
you.
but I just put a link in the box. We had promised an announcement about the media kit, and knowing that when you're online, having some assets you can use, some visuals, some videos, some prompts. The kit has all kinds of materials, and we can add to it, and it can continue to evolve. But we wanted to share it tonight with those of you who are watching. We'll get the word out, of course, in the following days. But the idea is you don't have to reinvent the wheel. That there's great stuff out there that you can use for messaging, just to kind of get people's attention if you are online and looking to start a conversation. And some of the social media prompts, there's a letter writing template. There's just ideas there so you don't have to say, where do I start? Here's some great jumping off points. And then as you get energy and you get people responding, you can start to build your own. But
Some
please,
people just need, I have found in this advocacy work, it's not for everybody.
no,
It is, I think, Susan, you said it takes a little bit of courage, but given a little bit of information, like you said, Walter, a little template, something or other, a little sample, this or that people, if it's important, and I hope we've made the case for the importance of maintaining our educational prowess in this country,
Yeah.
that people will say, well, I could do that.
Right.
Mhm.
I could do this a little bit.
Right.
Maybe I'm not gonna get 100 people and march on the state capitol,
right,
but I can do this one little thing. If enough people each do one little thing,
yes,
then
Right,
we've got a movement.
yes,
right,
We've got a movement. We don't need
and
10 people to do 100 things.
no,
right.
We need 1,000 people to do one thing.
No,
amen.
we're talking about, we're talking we're talking about our grandchildren, okay?
Yes,
All our children have been educated one way or another under the current system.
Yep.
But we're talking about our grandchildren. I'm really concerned about the next generation,
right,
the generation that, I have a grandson in school, and I'm going to be a grandmother this summer of my very first granddaughter. So
wow,
I'm very
congratulations.
excited about
Yeah,
that. But
yeah.
I think about her, and I think about what will happen to her. Okay. And I worry at this point because, I'm pretty familiar with all the things that are occurring in education because I stay on top of all of that.
Right,
But I want people to know that even if you're not a savvy computer user,
right,
pick up the phone,
right,
and talk to a local person, a local legislator, or even a school board member. Just be more proactive because this is going to affect your grandchildren and every generation going forward. We don't have a perfect education system, okay?
no,
But we're a highly educated country,
yes,
okay? And coming from parents who didn't even have a high school graduation, I've done remarkable things in my life, and I wouldn't have done that unless they believed in education. Okay.
right,
And that's the bottom line. And I know that sounds sort of corny, but
no,
believing in education is extremely important. And going forward, I want all the people out there to think about their children and their grandchildren going forward, and just make that one phone call. It's really easy.
And
Or
you know,
even
the
sending,
interesting thing is, it's not an hour.
right,
It's not
It's
30
not.
minutes.
right,
It is as simple as 5 minutes.
right,
You can look up the phone number. You can make a 5-minute call or sometimes a 2-minute call and say, I want to let you know I'm concerned about this. And I want
right,
it to be recorded as a concern.
right.
And
There you
then, okay,
that's it.
Yep.
Okay.
And
and that's fine.
in the media kit that Walter put up the link for,
Yeah,
he created a brochure that does a really good job of explaining what each of those
Mhm.
4 areas are.
yes,
Because
Right.
it's easy for us to say, oh, you just do blah, 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 blah,
Right.
and then you're
Yeah.
done. But then after we're done talking and y'all have gone off to dinner or whatever, when you come back to it later, it's like, what did they say? How do I do this?
Put the link up again, Walter. Put the link to
Yeah.
the media kit up again.
Yeah.
That is a absolutely brilliant piece of work.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Thank
and
you.
it is really valuable for people to come back to and read, but also to share with others.
Mhm.
yes,
Right. Right.
Yeah.
exactly,
Just
exactly.
forward that thing
Yep,
Yes.
yep,
to all
Exactly.
your sisters
I'm gonna
and
be-
brothers.
yep.
I'm
Yep.
going to share that with my organization, and making sure that they, you know, are also proactive to all of this. A lot of them are sitting in schools, but you can
Yes,
still be proactive if you're a teacher, okay?
exactly.
And it's important to be able to take that, and if they want to take that and send it out to someone else,
Right.
that's important. You know, just spread the word, okay, on how to do this. It's easier than you think.
Amen. And for all these things, because we're not lobbyists, we're not necessarily, political wonks who just thrive in policy all day. Um, we're offering educator advocacy training starting on January 28th. It's 4
Excellent.
sessions going through March 11th. Isabel Bazada Jones, who's on the town hall tonight, is leading that and is excited planning for that. She formerly worked with the Ohio Education Association, so she's done the work in the inside. She understands what the challenges are and how to approach organizations. There's Isabel saying hello in the chat.
Hey,
And
Isabel.
we would
Hi,
love to
Isabel.
have you join us. It's an extraordinary opportunity for all of us who say, yeah, but I'm an educator. That's a whole nother world. I don't even know how to dip my toe in. Isabel makes it
Is it free,
natural.
Walter?
It's not, we're just charging enough to cover cost.
That's fine. I think people would want to know
Yes.
just a little bit that it's a
Yes,
very minor.
it is. We do not charge any exorbitant fees at the Worthy Educator. And so the idea is give people opportunities that they can't find anywhere else. And in this case, it's how to be your own advocate for your education priorities. Because we know in our hearts what we believe and we know the good work we do every day. But being able to make that a narrative to take to others and influence others and help start a movement, Isabel can help. So
And
Isabel, thank you.
one of the things I would, and if I'm wrong, just say, no, Cheryl. But one of the things I think this advocacy training, while we're focused on the concern of education,
Yeah.
the skills, techniques, and strategies that you learn, maybe you're
Agree.
concerned seriously more about the environment. These things have transferability.
Right.
Healthcare, as you mentioned, Susan.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, I can't even think of all the things that we should be advocating for, but if you have other concerns, this training, I'm gonna bet, is transferable
It is.
to other areas of concern that you would like to speak up about, because it's skills and strategies.
It is. And Isabel is such a natural as she talks about it. It's about telling your story. And then once you're able to tell your own
Right.
story,
That's right.
tell the story for others and slowly ripple out that influence of what the narrative is about education. So please, you're all welcome to participate as it benefits you. Also, next Thursday, and this is free, our third Transforming Education panel. And we've been doing these discussions every other month. And just wonderful, fruitful discussions that go beyond the advocacy work to how do we re-envision education? Once we get these decision makers' attention, what's that going to look like? How do we help influence how to think about the institution of education in a digital age and in a future that we can't even really picture yet because it's all happening so quickly? So that is free of charge, and love having people attend because everyone needs a voice. Everyone needs to be able to have the opportunity to participate.
Everybody has a voice. You just have to use it.
Yep.
Just have to-
That's the fact.
That's my
Thanks,
tagline.
Cheryl.
Everybody has a voice. You just have to use it.
Right. That's right.
Definitely.
So as a final announcement, we're very committed to this. And so we've already talked and decided to hold a February town hall on Monday, the 17th, 7 o'clock in the evening again. We want to continue the conversation. We hope to continue to broaden and expand participation, create awareness, continue to provide ideas and strategies and inspiration to get you to participate as advocates and be your own best advocates for the work ahead. Panelists, anything you'd like to say as we wrap up this first town hall, things that need to be reemphasized or something we missed?
I just say thank you, Walter, for championing this and
Yeah.
being and leading forward, raising the flag, because it takes leadership. You've always been a leader, Walter, but keep
Yeah.
leading.
Hey,
Yeah, so Walter and I had a conversation with Walter about this,
Yes.
earlier, actually a couple of months ago now, I
yeah,
guess.
yep.
So I said to him, I said, we need to do something here. Okay. So I thank you, Walter, for, conducting and leading us on this. And look forward to the next town hall. I'll be leaving the next day for Costa Rica for 10 days. So
Wonderful.
I will the next morning.
Oh, it
So.
sounds like a terrible problem to have
It is a
there,
terrible
Costa Rica,
problem.
Walter, and then Costa Rica.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe-
So, yeah, so I'm leaving on the morning of the 18th. But I really appreciate, Walter, that, that you've taken this on. I'm so glad that you have a worthy educator
Yes.
as the vehicle for us to be able to voice all of this and to invite other educators in this conversation.
Absolutely. And thank you all
Yeah.
for contributing your time and talents and wisdom and experience and expertise because we need you. And
Well,
so
Three of
grateful.
us, the
I
three
get to
of
say
us
thank
have
you
never had a
too.
lack of words.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know that, Susan and Kathleen, we've done things together. Three of us have never been shy and
Yeah.
have been
Never.
remiss in not being able to speak. So Walter, you
Mhm.
just grabbed us, at
Hey.
just the right time.
And Kathleen, I'll actually be calling in February from San Jose del Cabo.
Oh, man.
Oh, you
I know.
will? Okay.
Yeah, I will. Yeah,
It's a nice place to call in for a town hall.
it
Yeah,
is.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Supreme
I'll
sacrifice.
be in Texas, but
Yeah, you know.
sometimes that's
Oh.
like a foreign country. So y'all know what I'm saying.
Well, and you're
Well,
calling
you're-
in from Florida this time. So
Yes.
That's
yeah.
another
Yeah.
foreign country.
So,
Well, yeah. These days, yeah.
we do think that Texas is a foreign country up here in the Northeast.
Just
So-
ask them, they'll tell you it's the Republic of Texas.
That's right.
yes, ma'am.
That's right.
The Republic of Texas, right?
Well, thank you all so much. Kathleen, have a
All right.
wonderful time in
Wonderful
Costa
to
Rica.
see all of you.
Well, no, you're gonna
Good
see
to
me
see you
next
too.
month, the day before I leave. So,
Oh, it's
yeah,
next
I'll
month.
be all
Okay.
set.
All right.
Oh, next month. Oh, yes, I'm leaving on the 18th of February.
You did say that. All right.
Yeah.
Cheryl,
All
enjoy
right.
FETC?
I'm
Yeah,
here.
do.
Yeah,
Tell
enjoy.
everybody,
Enjoy.
Thank
hey,
you for having me, Walter.
Absolutely.
You're
Talk soon.
welcome.
Take
It's been
care.
fun.
All right.
Bye-bye.
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 Yep, bye-bye.